The cold wind howled through the abandoned streets of Hollow Creek, Maine, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth and decaying leaves. The town had always been quiet, a sleepy dot on the map, but tonight, the silence felt wrong, not the calm before a storm, more like the calm before something that wanted to be heard. Ethan Walker, 17, shivered as he clutched his jacket tighter. He had lived in Hollow Creek his entire life, yet tonight, the streets felt foreign. His parents, Karen and Michael Walker, had insisted they take a weekend trip to see Ethan's grandmother, Margaret, in Portsmouth, 3 hours south. But the route the GPS took them down was unnervingly isolated, past forests so dense that the headlights barely touched the road. "This shortcut doesn't look like a shortcut," Ethan muttered, more to himself than to his mom, who kept glancing nervously at the darkened tree line outside the windows. "Just trust me," Karen replied. Her voice was calm, but there was tension beneath it. Michael didn't say anything, his jaw tight as he drove faster, as if trying to outrun some invisible weight pressing down on the car. They didn't notice the first sign. It wasn't until Ethan looked out the rear window that he saw a figure standing in the middle of the road, far enough away that the headlights only hinted at its outline. It didn't move, didn't react, just waited. "Dad, slow down," Ethan shouted, pointing. Michael slammed the brakes, tires screeching. The car fishtailed slightly before stopping, but when they looked again, the figure was gone. "Probably some kid messing around," Michael muttered, but the unease in his voice betrayed him. By the time they reached Portsmouth, night had fallen fully. Rain pelted the windshield, and fog crept along the edges of the road like crawling fingers. Margaret's house, a quaint colonial on a hill overlooking the river, should have felt welcoming. Instead, its dimly lit windows, and the way the wind moaned through the cracks in the eaves made it look abandoned or worse. Waiting as soon as they stepped inside, Ethan felt it, a weight in the air, like the room had been holding its breath for decades. Margaret greeted them with a warm smile, but her eyes darted nervously toward the hallways, as if expecting someone or something. "You kids sleep upstairs," Margaret said, her voice quiet. "I'll get the rooms ready." Ethan's room overlooked the backyard, where the fog hung thick, and the skeletal branches of the trees swayed like twisted arms. He unpacked silently, the creaking of the floorboards beneath him magnifying in the stillness. Then he heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible scratching, like nails on wood, coming from the attic above. "Grandma," he called, but no answer. He shrugged it off. Houses make noises at night. Old houses, or so he thought. By midnight, the wind had intensified, rattling the windows as if trying to shake the walls themselves. Ethan woke to a faint light in the hallway. He sat up, heart pounding, and noticed that the hallway stretched farther than it should have. At the end, a shadow moved, unnaturally fluid, like smoke with intent. Then he heard the whisper, "Ethan." It was so soft he almost thought he imagined it. Then again, "Ethan, come." Ethan froze, paralyzed by fear. The shadow elongated and twisted, slithering toward the stairs. And then, for the first time, he realized it wasn't his grandmother calling. It was something else. Something waiting. Something that had been patient for years. He ran to his parents' room. The door was locked from the inside. "Mom, Dad," he yelled, pounding on the wood. But the voice that answered him wasn't theirs. "Don't be afraid. We're already here." The lights flickered. The air turned icy. Ethan's breath came out in puffs, even though the heater was on. Shadows stretched across the walls, moving independently of the furniture. And then he saw it too. Glowing eyes, hovering just above the hallway floor, fixed on him. A voice, old, cracked, and impossibly deep code from everywhere and nowhere. "You can't leave. Not tonight." And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, everything went black. Ethan was on the floor, heart hammering. The whispering had stopped. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever had been waiting in the shadows was still there, and it was hungry. Cliffhanger for part 2. Ethan must confront the dark entity that has begun stalking his family, but as he tries to warn his parents, he realizes the house itself seems to have turned against them. Doors lead to impossible spaces. Shadows move on their own, and the figure in the attic, it's not alone. Ethan lay on the floor, heart hammering, staring at the black hallway ahead. The glowing eyes were gone, or maybe they had simply melted back into the shadows, but the cold didn't leave. The air was thick, heavy, almost wet, as if the house itself were breathing. He tried the door to his parents' room, locked, again. From the inside, panic rose in his chest. "Mom, Dad, open the door," he screamed. Silence. Then, a faint giggle, a child's voice, not real, yet it was impossibly close. The sound bounced off the walls, seeming to come from every direction. Ethan's mind raced. He remembered the stories his grandmother, Margaret, had told about Hollow Creek, strange disappearances, missing children, shadows that didn't belong to anything living. Everyone thought they were old wives' tales, but now, in the flickering darkness of this house, Ethan began to believe them. A faint creak above him made him look up. The attic. That's where the first shadow had come. From his stomach twisted. He wanted to run, but something, fear, instinct, or a strange pull made him take the stairs toward the attic. The staircase groaned under his weight. As he reached the landing, he saw the first clue. Scratches on the wooden wall. Long, deep, claw marks too tall for a child, too precise for an animal. And beneath them, written in what looked like wet, blackened blood, were words, "We see you." Ethan's throat went dry. He ran back to his room, slamming the door behind him. But the room had changed. The hallway outside the window was longer than before, stretching into an impossible darkness. He tried to call his parents again. Still locked. Still silence. Then, the shadows moved. The walls began to pulse, as if breathing. Shapes formed in the dark. Twisted figures. Grotesque. Faceless. They reached toward him. A cold hand grazed his shoulder. Or maybe it didn't. Ethan couldn't tell. Suddenly, a voice that sounded like his grandmother whispered, "Ethan, don't trust them." The shadows froze. The voice faded, but the eyes returned, dozens of them this time, hovering at the edges of the darkness, glowing red, unblinking, staring. Ethan ran to the attic stairs again. He had no plan, no weapon, nothing but adrenaline. The attic door creaked open, revealing a room he didn't recognize, filled with dozens of antique mirrors, each reflecting not him, but distorted versions of his family, screaming silently, trapped behind the glass. A figure stepped out of one mirror, a small boy with hollow eyes, smiling at him. "You can't save them," the boy whispered. Ethan screamed and bolted down the stairs. But the house had changed completely. The hallway that led to the front door now twisted like a maze. Each turn led to another shadowed room, another reflection of horrors, another whisper. The lights in the house flickered, dying, and in that final blink before darkness swallowed him, Ethan saw his parents, standing at the foot of the stairs, but their eyes were black voids, faces twisted in silent screams. Something cold and sharp brushed his ear. Another whisper, "Stay with us." Ethan realized the horrifying truth. The house didn't want them to leave, not alive, not as themselves. Ethan's chest burned with every ragged breath as he stumbled through the twisted hallways of his grandmother's house. The shadows had multiplied, creeping along walls, floors, and ceilings. Every step seemed to stretch time. Each heartbeat echoed like a drum of doom. The house was alive, and it was watching. He tried to remember the stories Margaret had told him about Hollow Creek, legends of disappearances, ghost children, families trapped in their own homes. Until now, they were just bedtime tales, superstitions. But now, the truth clawed at him with icy fingers. The attic still called to him. Something in Ethan knew that if he was to survive, he had to confront it. He returned to the attic door. The mirrors inside glimmered faintly, reflecting a distorted world. In one, he saw his parents again, but not as they were. Their faces twisted, mouths open in silent screams, eyes completely black, their hands reaching toward him, as if to pull him in. A whisper, old and brittle, floated from the largest. "Mira, you must know. The house feeds on grief." Ethan's heart skipped. The voice was familiar, but not his grandmother's. It was older, darker. Curiosity and fear pushed him closer. As he touched the mirror, the surface rippled like water. Suddenly, he was no longer in the attic. The mirror became a portal. He tumbled into darkness and landed on a floor made of old, rotting wood. The walls were lined with photographs, hundreds of them, of families who had lived in this house over the past century. Each one had eyes scratched out. Beneath them, in faded letters, were names and dates of death. Ethan's stomach turned. The house wasn't just haunted, it was a trap, a predator that fed on families, pulling them into its reflection-filled prison to torment them forever. A soft, melodic humming echoed through the room. Ethan turned. At the far end, a little boy sat on the floor, rocking back and forth, a porcelain doll in his arms. His eyes were black as coal. "You're next," the boy whispered, his smile unnerving. "They all come, but none leave." Ethan froze. Then a memory surfaced, Margaret, warning him, "Never trust the house. It wants your grief. It wants your fear, and it will never let go." Suddenly, the floorboards groaned. Shadows writhed across the walls, like living creatures. A cold hand grabbed his ankle. Ethan screamed, pulling away, but the house tightened its grip. "I won't let you take me," he yelled, scrambling to his feet. The boy laughed a sound that pierced Ethan's bones. "You can't escape what's inside you. The house doesn't just take bodies, it takes souls." Ethan's mind raced. He realized the house was feeding on their fear, on the memories of his family, especially the grief and guilt from their past. It had started with the shadows, but now it was hunting them directly. A flash of lightning illuminated the room. In the light, Ethan saw a door at the far end of the hall. It wasn't in the attic before. He ran toward it, throwing it open, and found himself back in the main hallway. The house had shifted again. Something cold brushed past his cheek. Ethan stumbled. Through the darkness, a whisper rose. "One of you will stay, forever." And then, a terrifying realization struck him. The house wasn't just haunted, it was alive, and it had already chosen its victim. Ethan's parents appeared at the end of the hall, but their eyes were now black voids. Their mouths opened in synchronized screams, though no sound came. Shadows stretched from their bodies toward Ethan, reaching, pulling. Panic consumed him. He turned and ran toward the staircase, but the stairs now led up into an endless void of darkness. Every exit had vanished. The house was sealing itself, swallowing him into its labyrinth. And just as the shadows touched his shoulders, he heard the voice again, this time his grandmother's, but twisted, echoing, "Ethan, the only way to survive is to understand the house before it understands you." Ethan stumbled through the endless hallways of Hollow Creek House, shadows whispering and stretching toward him like living tendrils. His heart pounded, his legs ached, but he knew he couldn't stop. If he did, the house would consume him, just like it had countless families before. He paused at a small door he had never noticed before, tucked behind a darkened corner of the hallway. It was old, splintered, with rusty hinges, and it seemed almost to pulse under his touch, as if breathing. Taking a deep breath, Ethan opened it. The room beyond was a library, dust-choked and silent, lit only by a faint, unnatural glow emanating from the walls. Bookshelves stretched impossibly high, packed with ancient tomes bound in cracked leather. At the center of the room, a large, circular rug had faded into obscurity. But it was etched with strange symbols, circles intersecting triangles, lines that twisted into incomprehensible patterns. Ethan's stomach churned as he realized something. The symbols were alive, wriggling subtly when he looked away. The air here was thick with centuries of grief and anger, memories of the families who had been trapped within the house. He ran his fingers over a book lying open on a pedestal. The text was handwritten, in a language that seemed familiar yet foreign. As he squinted, the words shifted into English, as if the house itself wanted him to read them. The house of Hollow Creek is no ordinary dwelling. It was built over the roots of the old woods, where children disappeared without a trace. It hungers for grief, thrives on fear, and shapes reality around those who enter. Those who come seeking shelter are often taken, but the house always leaves a chance. The mind must confront the darkness to survive. Ethan shivered. This was more than a haunted house. It was a living entity, born of sorrow, feeding on families' pain, and trapping them in an endless cycle of terror. A soft scratching echoed behind him. Ethan spun around, and a figure emerged from the shadows. A young woman, her eyes hollow, and black hair tangled, wearing a dress as old as the house itself. I can help you," she whispered. Her voice carried both sorrow and urgency. "My name is Lydia. I was trapped here decades ago. The house. It kills slowly, but it can be fought if you understand it." Ethan's pulse spiked. "How do I fight it?" Lydia's expression darkened. "The house isn't just walls and shadows. It's every regret, every memory, every secret. It will use them against you. You must face the things you fear most, or it will take your family and you forever." She pointed toward a corner of the library. On a pedestal rested a small, black mirror, warped and cloudy. "This is the heart of the house. Its power lies within this mirror. But beware, the mirror shows what you fear most. If you falter, you'll never leave." Ethan approached, trembling, but he forced himself forward. The mirror was icy cold, almost alive under his touch. His reflection wavered, then changed. He saw his parents screaming silently, their faces hollow, reaching out for him, and behind them, the boy from the mirrors, the first shadow, grinning with eyes that burned red. A whisper echoed from the mirror itself. "Choose, or lose them forever." Ethan's chest tightened. He realized that to save his parents, he had to enter the mirror, confront the house's darkness, and face the fears it projected from his own mind. One wrong step, and they would all be lost. The shadows began to swirl around him, crawling along the walls like liquid night. The temperature dropped, and Ethan could see his own breath in the dim glow. The whispers grew louder, dozens of voices overlapping. "You cannot escape. You cannot escape. You cannot escape." Ethan took a deep breath. He had no choice. He had to enter. And as he stepped forward into the mirror, the room disappeared, the library vanished, and he fell into darkness. Cliffhanger for Part 5. Ethan is now inside the mirror, inside the heart of the house itself. Here, reality bends. Shadows become solid. Fear is a weapon, and every memory of his family is twisted against him. Will he survive the house's most personal horrors, or will he become another ghost trapped forever? Ethan fell into darkness, but it was not empty. The air was thick and viscous, pressing against his skin like a living thing. The ground beneath him shifted and rippled, as if he were standing on water, yet solid enough to hold him. He looked up or tried to, but the ceiling stretched infinitely. Shadows moved in impossible directions, crawling along invisible surfaces. Whispers echoed from every corner, repeating his deepest fears. "They're gone. You can't save them. It's all your fault." The mirror realm of Hollow Creek House was alive, and it knew him. Ethan tried to move forward, and the shadows parted just enough to reveal a hallway that resembled the one in the real house but twisted. Walls leaned at impossible angles, doors led nowhere, and the floor seemed to breathe. Every step echoed with whispers and soft laughter, like the voices of the families trapped here before him. Suddenly, one of the shadows solidified. It became the boy from the mirrors, the one with hollow eyes and a smile that chilled Ethan to his core. "You shouldn't have come," the boy whispered. His voice carried a strange, echoing resonance, as if multiple voices spoke in unison. "This is your mind now. Your fears, your regrets, they belong to me." Ethan clenched his fists. "I'm not afraid of you," he shouted. But the shadow only laughed, and the world bent around him. The hallway stretched infinitely, and Ethan saw visions of his family. His parents were trapped in cages made of shadows, screaming silently. He saw himself as a child, alone, terrified, reliving moments of guilt he had buried for years. "Stop. Stop it," Ethan yelled, tears stinging his eyes. But the visions pressed in closer. The house fed on them. Each heartbeat gave it more strength. Then Lydia appeared, her form shimmering and translucent. "Ethan," she called, "you must confront it, not run. The house uses your fear as chains. Look at it, name it, control it." Ethan shook his head, panic surging. "I can't. I'm too weak." "Then they're lost." Lydia's voice was urgent, echoing like a bell. "Your parents, yourself, they'll be part of the house forever." The shadow boy lunged at Ethan, stretching impossibly long arms. Ethan felt an icy grip close around his chest. Memories flashed. Arguments with his parents, times he ignored their advice, moments he blamed himself for things beyond his control. Every regret became a physical weight, pressing him down. Ethan gritted his teeth. "No, I am not afraid," he screamed, focusing on the truth. "You don't control me. This house, it only has power because I let it." The shadows hissed and shrieked, convulsing as if in pain. The cages around his parents dissolved, the hallway trembled, and for the first time, the mirror realm wavered. But the house was cunning. It conjured a new fear. Ethan saw himself trapped forever, his own body twisted and unrecognizable, screaming silently as the shadows consumed him. "You will stay." The voice of the house roared from every surface. Ethan realized he couldn't fight it with strength alone. He had to understand its origin, its hunger, its connection to Hollow Creek. Memories of Margaret's stories surfaced. Old woods, missing children, grief that never healed. The house had always fed on sorrow, pending reality to trap souls. Breathing deeply, Ethan reached out to the shadow boy. "I understand you," he whispered. "You exist because of fear. You are only a reflection of what we allow ourselves to feel. I see you. I see the house, and I will not let it win." The boy froze. The shadows recoiled. For a moment, everything stilled. Then, a violent gust of wind hurled Ethan backward, and the walls of the mirror realm cracked like broken glass. Ethan tumbled to the floor, gasping, but he noticed something. A faint light at the far end of the hallway, a door that hadn't been there before. Through it, he could hear the distant, muffled voices of his parents. He had a choice. Move toward the light and risk the house lashing out with its full power, or stay and confront the shadows further, potentially losing himself to their madness. Stealing his courage, Ethan ran. But the shadows weren't done. They lashed at him with forms made of pain and memory, clawing at his legs, freezing his limbs, whispering his failures. The house roared in unison. "You belong to us." Ethan pushed forward, every step agony, and just as he reached the light, everything went black. Ethan stumbled through the darkness, guided by the faint, flickering light ahead. His chest burned, and his legs trembled, but he forced himself forward. Every step was met with resistance. The shadows of the mirror realm twisted and lashed at him, echoing his deepest regrets. Finally, he reached the door. Unlike any he had seen before, it was massive, carved from dark oak with intricate symbols swirling like writhing snakes. As he touched the handle, he felt a cold pulse run through his veins, as if the house itself were warning him to turn back. Ignoring the warning, Ethan pushed it open. The chamber beyond was vast, bigger than any room in the real house. The walls were lined with ancient books and scrolls, their pages yellowed with age. Candles floated in midair, casting flickering shadows that moved independently of the flame. In the center of the room lay a large, black stone pedestal. Atop it rested a small wooden box, covered in carvings that made Ethan's skin crawl. As he approached, a voice whispered low, echoing, almost like it came from the floor itself. "He who opens the heart of Hollow Creek must bear its truth." Ethan's fingers trembled as he lifted the lid. Inside was a diary, its pages brittle but legible. The first page read, "I am Abigail Hollow. I built this house over the roots of the old Hollow Creek forest. Children vanished there, families suffered. I made this place to bind sorrow and fear into something alive, so no one would forget, so the grief could never leave." Ethan felt a chill. The house wasn't just haunted, it was created as a vessel for grief and pain, centuries old. Abigail Hollow had infused it with dark magic, giving it sentience. Families who entered were trapped, their fear fueling the house's growth. A sound behind him made him spin. Lydia stood there, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. "You're learning," she said. "But knowledge alone won't save them. You have to confront the heart. Face the original sorrow Abigail trapped here, or the house will consume everything you love." Ethan turned back to the pedestal. The diary detailed rituals Abigail used to bind souls, with diagrams showing rooms of mirrors, shadow forms, and mirrors acting as portals. The last entry chilled him to the bone. The heart of the house is not a place, but a truth. Grief is eternal, and those who enter must decide become part of it or destroy it. Suddenly, the shadows surged, and Ethan realized the truth. The house could manipulate reality itself, forcing victims to relive their worst memories until they were hollow shells. The shadows weren't random, they were manifestations of Abigail Hollow's curse, feeding on human emotion for centuries. A whisper cut through the chamber. "Your parents, your soul. The house will take them, or you can take it first." Ethan's heart pounded. He understood what he had to do, but it required confronting Abigail Hollow herself. The chamber seemed to pulse in response, the walls stretching and twisting, revealing a hidden doorway that wasn't there before. Through it, a faint silhouette, appeared a woman in a tattered dress, her face pale, eyes hollow and empty, staring at him. "She is the heart," Lydia said softly, "the source of all this darkness. You must face her, Ethan, and remember, she knows everything about you, your fears, your regrets, everything." Ethan's stomach churned, but he clenched his fists. He had come too far to turn back now. He stepped through the doorway, leaving the safety of the hidden chamber behind. Immediately, the world shifted. He was standing in a hallway made entirely of mirrors, reflecting not just him, but twisted versions of his family, screaming silently. The shadows twisted into forms of Abigail herself, reaching for him with hands that seemed to stretch for eternity. Ethan realized the fight was far from over. This wasn't just about escaping, this was about breaking the curse itself. Ethan stepped through the doorway, and the world warped around him. The hallway of mirrors stretched infinitely, reflecting twisted versions of his family, his childhood memories, and even himself, but all distorted, hollow-eyed, screaming silently. A cold wind swept past him, carrying a voice that slithered into his mind. "You cannot defeat me. I am your fear, your grief, your guilt, all bound into one." Then she appeared, Abigail Hollow, her tattered dress trailing behind her like smoke. Her eyes were black voids, yet they seemed to pierce straight into Ethan's soul. Her mouth curved into a smile that promised pain, despair, and eternal imprisonment. "You're too late," she hissed. "Your parents, your family, They are mine, and soon, so will you be. Ethan's chest tightened. Memories surged. Every time he had blamed himself, every moment he had ignored warnings, every regret he had buried deep, all of it was now materializing in front of him. Shadows morphed into terrifying versions of people he had known and loved, screaming at him for his failures. Lydia's voice echoed, faint but urgent. Ethan, face her. Don't run from your fear. The house feeds on your hesitation. Ethan took a trembling breath. I'm not afraid of you, he said, his voice cracking, but he forced himself to continue. You don't own me. You don't own them. Abigail laughed, a sound that made the mirrors shiver. You think bravery alone can save you. I know your mind, boy. Your worst fears are mine to command. The shadows surged, and suddenly Ethan was no longer standing in a hallway. He was inside his own memories, twisted and corrupted. He saw himself as a child, lost in the woods behind his house, calling for his parents. No one there. He saw accidents he had blamed himself for. He saw moments he couldn't forget. Everything felt real, too real. A shadow lunged at him, materializing as his own reflection, but it was hollow, twisted, grinning. It grabbed him, trying to drag him into a mirror. Ethan screamed, pulling back, but the shadows multiplied. You are mine, Abigail whispered. Ethan remembered Lydia's words. You must understand the house to control it. Suddenly, clarity struck him. He realized Abigail wasn't just a ghost or a spirit. She was the manifestation of the house itself, the embodiment of centuries of grief and trapped souls. The mirrors, the shadows, the hallucinations, they were extensions of her will. If he wanted to save his family, he couldn't fight blindly. He had to face the memories, accept the guilt, and acknowledge his fears. He dropped to his knees, closing his eyes. He visualized his parents not hollow, not screaming, but smiling and alive. He thought of the memories he loved, moments of warmth, laughter, protection. He let himself feel the pain and guilt, but he also let himself release it. The shadows screamed, twisting violently. Abigail's form flickered, the smile on her face cracking, her voice faltering. No, you cannot control me. Ethan opened his eyes. The mirrors shattered, one by one, fragments dissolving into nothingness. The shadow boy, the hollow reflections, even Abigail herself, began to fade, writhing and dissolving into the air. Then, a flash of light. Ethan found himself back in the hidden chamber. The mirror pedestal shattered. His parents stood before him, real, alive, trembling but unharmed. Lydia's form appeared beside him, smiling faintly. You've done it, she said. You faced the house and survived. But remember, Hollow Creek House will always exist. It waits for the next family, the next grief. Ethan's legs gave way, and he sank to the floor, exhausted but relieved. His parents rushed to him, embracing him tightly. For a moment, it seemed over. The house was silent, the shadows gone. But deep in the back of his mind, Ethan felt it, the lingering presence of the darkness, whispering, waiting, patient. Hands shook as he stepped out of Hollow Creek House with his parents. The morning fog hung heavy over the forest, filtering sunlight into a dull gray haze. The house behind them sat silent, its windows dark, as if nothing had happened. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The air felt thicker, heavier, and the shadows of the trees seemed too long, too deliberate, stretching unnaturally across the ground. His parents, still shaken, held him close. Are you okay? His mother whispered. Ethan nodded, though deep down he knew the battle wasn't over. Hollow Creek House had been defeated, yes, but Abigail Hollow's presence, the darkness she embodied, lingered back home. The first night should have been peaceful. Ethan's parents unpacked, trying to convince themselves that the nightmare was over. But the house's influence had followed him. Ethan noticed the small things first, shadows that moved independently across walls, lingering just beyond the corner of his eye, whispers that sounded like Lydia's faint voice, urging him to look closer. Reflections in mirrors that were slightly off, showing him something that wasn't there. Then, it escalated. One night, while Ethan slept, he awoke to a soft humming, the same haunting melody he had heard in the mirror realm. He sat up, heart pounding, and realized it was coming from the family photo wall. Every photograph of his family had changed. In each, their eyes were hollow, black voids, staring directly at him. "Not again," Ethan whispered. Panic surged. He ran to his parents' room, but the air was freezing, and the shadows seemed to close in around him. His mother's voice echoed from behind, soft but distorted. "Ethan, it's here." It never left. Suddenly, the lights flickered. A faint outline appeared at the end of the hallway, a small boy, grinning, cold black eyes glowing. Ethan froze. The same boy from the mirror realm. "You survived the house, but you cannot escape me," the boy said, voice layered with laughter and whispers. "I follow those who have faced Hollow Creek, and you have tasted fear." Ethan's mind raced. Hollow Creek House wasn't confined to its walls. Its curse, its hunger, could follow the survivors, feeding off fear wherever they went. Over the next days, Ethan noticed more signs. Doors slammed shut on their own. Even in broad daylight, mirrors showed fleeting images of Abigail's pale, twisted face. Nightmares became more vivid, showing scenes of the house bending reality and trapping his family again. Desperate, Ethan sought out local records. He discovered decades of disappearances in the area surrounding Hollow Creek. Families vanishing or found traumatized, claiming they felt followed. Even after leaving the house, the final realization hit him like a blade. Hollow Creek House was not just a place. It was a sentient curse, capable of extending beyond its walls, seeking out those who had confronted it. Ethan knew one thing. To protect his parents and himself, he would have to face the curse again, outside the house, in the real world. But this time, it would be different. No mirrors, no hallways, just him, his family, and the relentless, creeping darkness. The last scene of the night sealed his dread. Ethan glanced out the window and froze. Across the street, in the fog, he saw a shadowy outline of a house, its shape distorted, impossible, yet unmistakably Hollow Creek. And in the window, the black-eyed boy waved at him, grinning. "See you soon, Ethan." The sun had barely risen over the small town of Hollow Creek when Ethan realized the truth. The nightmare had followed him home. The house may have been defeated, or so he thought, but Abigail Hollow's curse had escaped its walls. Shadows clung to the corners of his home, twisting unnaturally, moving when no one else was looking. His parents tried to act normal, but the tension was impossible to hide. Ethan's mind raced as he recalled the diary from the hidden chamber. The curse thrived on fear, guilt, and grief. He knew he had to act before it consumed them all. First, he attempted to block it. Mirrors were covered, doors locked, lights left on day and night, but nothing worked. The shadows ignored walls and locks, slithering across floors and ceilings like living ink. Then, the first real attack occurred. Ethan was in the kitchen when he saw it. The black-eyed boy from the mirror realm standing silently, grinning. "Ethan, I told you, fear is mine," the boy whispered. The shadows around him pulsed and stretched, trying to envelop Ethan's legs. Ethan's breath caught. He lunged toward the boy, but his hands passed through empty air. The boy's laughter echoed, each note twisting into the whisper of Abigail Hollow herself. "I am everywhere," the voice hissed. "Every corner, every shadow, every regret you carry. I consume it all." Ethan stumbled back and realized he was not just fighting the boy, he was fighting Abigail Hollow herself, now unbound, able to manifest anywhere fear existed. Desperate, Ethan remembered something from the diary, a ritual Abigail had feared away to contain the curse, using courage and memory as anchors. It required a personal connection to the people you loved most, your family, your bonds. Fear Alone couldn't survive against love and willpower combined. He gathered his parents in the living room. "We have to do this together," he said, panic and determination mixing in his voice. "Whatever you felt, whatever you fear, we face it as one. We can't let it win." They joined hands, forming a circle. Ethan closed his eyes and focused. He visualized every moment of genuine happiness with his parents, birthdays, vacations, bedtime stories. Every memory became a shield against the shadows pushing the darkness back. The black-eyed boy screeched, shrinking and twisting, trying to pierce the circle. Shadows writhed violently across the walls, forming faces of Abigail Hollow, screaming, clawing. But the bond of love, the unity of their shared courage repelled it. Ethan's voice rose. "Steady now. You do not control us. You do not own our lives." The shadows convulsed, swirling faster and faster, trying to break through. And then, a flash of light erupted from the circle, blinding, piercing the darkness. Abigail Hollow's presence shrieked, twisting into a vortex, before collapsing into a single, black mirror shard, which Ethan instinctively smashed with a hammer from the toolbox. Silence. The house was gone. The shadows receded. The black-eyed boy was no more. And for the first time since the ordeal began, Ethan and his parents could breathe. But deep inside, Ethan felt a lingering chill, a warning. The shard had been destroyed, yes, but Abigail Hollow had been clever. The curse might be contained, for now, but it had survived in fragments. Somewhere, somehow, it could rise again. Ethan collapsed to the floor, exhausted but determined. He had fought the darkness, but he knew this was not the end of Hollow Creek's story. Somewhere in the shadows, a trace of Abigail Hollow's malevolence waited. Patient, silent, ready to strike when fear returned. Weeks had passed since Ethan, with his parents' help, had seemingly defeated the curse of Hollow Creek. Life returned to a fragile normal. Daylight felt warmer, the air less heavy, and the shadows that once moved independently now obeyed the natural flow of light. But Ethan knew better. Darkness had a memory. Abigail Hollow had been clever, and somewhere, in fragments, she still waited. One evening, Ethan sat alone in his room, staring at the remnants of the mirror shard he had smashed in Part 9. It had splintered into countless tiny pieces, each reflecting distorted images of the house, the mirror realm, and the black-eyed boy. A soft whisper echoed in his mind, almost imperceptible. "You cannot destroy me, only delay me." His chest tightened. The memories of fear, the visions of Hollow Creek, the screams of trapped souls, they hadn't left him. The curse had changed him, sharpened his instincts, and etched an awareness that terror could return at any moment. Suddenly, his phone buzzed, a news alert. Strange disappearance, reported near Hollow Creek Forest. Ethan's blood ran cold. He knew the signs. The fragments of the curse had awakened someone else's fear, feeding, expanding, growing. It was no longer just about him. He bolted outside, flashlight in hand, racing toward the forest's edge. Shadows twisted in unnatural patterns under the moonlight. Every rustle of leaves, every broken branch, seemed orchestrated by Abigail herself. As he entered the forest, the air grew impossibly cold. Shapes moved in the corners of his vision, a child's laugh, soft and hollow, drifting across the trees. The black-eyed boy appeared again, grinning, then flickered out of existence. Ethan took a deep breath and remembered what he had learned. Fear was the source of the curse. Courage, love, and unity were its weakness. He called out into the forest, "Abigail Hollow, you may linger in shadows, but you cannot take us. We are not afraid." The forest seemed to respond. The shadows recoiled, twisting violently before consolidating into a vague humanoid form. Abigail herself, more terrifying than ever, composed entirely of darkness and shattered memories. Her voice echoed like a chorus of the damned. "You defy me, you who tasted fear. You will join them forever." Ethan's parents appeared behind him, holding hands. They had followed, trusting his instincts. Together, they formed a circle, just as they had in their home. Ethan focused on the love and memories that had saved them before. Family vacations, laughter, bedtime stories, moments of genuine joy. Each memory became a beacon of light, pushing Abigail's darkness back. The forest shook violently. The shadows screamed, the wind howled, and the air seemed to split. Abigail's form wavered, fracturing, each scream becoming quieter. With a final concentrated effort, Ethan shouted, "You are nothing without fear. Without us afraid, you are powerless." The darkness exploded in a blinding flash of white light. When Ethan opened his eyes, the forest was silent. No shadows moved unnaturally. No whispers lingered. The black-eyed boy was gone. Ethan's parents pulled him into a tight embrace. "Is it over?" his mother whispered, trembling. Ethan nodded, though cautiously. "For now, it's over. But Hollow Creek's darkness is patient. It may return. Someday we just have to be ready." As they left the forest, the morning sun broke through the fog, painting everything in gold. It felt like a true beginning, a fragile victory over centuries of darkness. But in the distance, deep within the Hollow Creek forest, a single shard of black glass glimmered under the roots of an old oak tree. Tiny whispers rose from its soft, faint, almost playful, "See you again, Ethan." The wind carried a chill down his spine. Even in victory, the shadow of Hollow Creek remained, a reminder that some darkness never truly dies. Epilogue: Ethan and his parents moved away from Hollow Creek, hoping for peace. They rebuilt their lives, cherishing every moment together, knowing that courage and love had saved them. But every time a shadow flickered just slightly differently, or a reflection lingered too long, Ethan remembered, some nightmares are eternal. Some darkness waits, patient, silent, until the next moment of fear. And somewhere, in the ruins of the house, Abigail Hollow's curse whispered through the fragments, ready to rise again. When fear returned,